Once upon a time, there was a brother and a sister called Hansel and Gretel. And they lived in a cottage with their father, who was a woodcutter, and their mean, nasty stepmother. Now, they were very poor, and they didn't have very much money or very much food. In fact, they had so little food that one day Hansel and Gretel's stepmother said to their father,
"We've got no food left. All we have is this small vegetable here. This is not enough food for us to all eat. We have got no pizzas. We have got no burgers. We have got no parmo. We have got no garlic bread and no pot noodles. You must take Hansel and Gretel out into the deep, dark woods and leave them there."
Now, their father didn't want to do this because he quite liked them. But she nagged, and she nagged, and she nagged, and she nagged, and she nagged, until eventually he said, "All right, I'll take them in the morning." Now, Hansel and Gretel had been upstairs listening, and when Hansel heard this, he said, "Don't worry, Gretel, I'll sneak down the stairs. I'll open the door, and I'll go outside and collect some of those white stones that shine in the moonlight. As we're going to the woods, we can leave them as a trail and follow them to get back." So that's what he did. He crept down the stairs, he opened the door, and he collected some white stones that shine in the moonlight, and he filled his pockets. Now, the next morning, the father called them, "Hansel, Gretel, come on, it's time for a walk in the deep, dark woods." They didn't very often go into the deep, dark woods because they're deep and they're dark, and there are foxes and wolves and bears and eagles and owls and butterflies. As they were walking through the deep, dark woods, Hansel, every now and then, would drop one of the small white stones, making a trail that they could follow to get back. And eventually they came to a clearing in the second deepest and second darkest part of the woods, and their father made a fire. He said, "All right, Hansel, go to sleep." And Hansel said, he said, "All right, Gretel, go to sleep." And Gretel said, and when they woke up, their father was gone. They were alone in the second deepest, second darkest part of the deep, dark woods, where there are foxes and wolves and bears and owls and eagles and butterflies. But Hansel wasn't worried, because he could see the first of the white stones that he'd dropped to make a trail leading all the way back to their cottage. They went to the first white stone, and then they could see another one. Then they saw the next one, and they followed all the white stones back until they got back to their cottage, back home. Their father was so pleased to see him, said, "Oh, you're back, you're back. I didn't like it without you, like." Their stepmother was not pleased to see them at all. She said,
"You're back. Go to your room straight away."
and she sent them to their bedroom, where they had to stay all night. This meant that Hansel could not creep down the stairs. He couldn't open the door. And he couldn't collect any more white stones that shine in the moonlight. Instead, they had to listen to their stepmother nagging and nagging,
"Take them back into the woods."
nagging,
"Take them back into the woods."
nagging,
"Take them back into the woods."
until eventually their father said, "All right, I will, I'll take them in the morning." The next morning, Hansel had an idea. Instead of eating his old piece of stale bread, he put it in his pocket. He thought he could make a trail of crumbs in the same way that he'd made a trail of stones that shone in the moonlight. Their father called them, "Go on, Hansel and Gretel, it's time for a walk in the deep, dark woods." And off they went into the deep, dark woods, where there are wolves and foxes and bears and owls and eagles and hedgehogs. And as they were walking, they walked this time to the very deepest, the very darkest part of the woods. And their father made a fire. Now, Hansel had been dropping his crumbs all the way along. And their father said, "Hansel, go to sleep." And Hansel said, he said, "Gretel, go to sleep." And Gretel said, when they woke up, their father was gone. Hansel wasn't worried. He said, "It's okay. We can follow the trail of crumbs that I dropped." But where were they? The crumbs had been eaten by the birds, not just the owls, and not just the eagles, but also the sparrows, and the pigeons, and the woodpeckers, and the blackbirds, and the robins, and the crows, and the unicorns. All of the crumbs were gone. They wandered around in the woods totally lost until, what did they see but a cottage, a very strange cottage made completely of sweets. It had chocolate buttons in the roof, it had icing for the walls, it was made of gingerbread. There were lollipops, there was candy floss, and there were candy canes. There were chewy sweets, there were crunchy sweets, there were marshmallows. Well, Hansel and Gretel couldn't believe it. They hadn't eaten for so long, they leapt towards it, and they started quickly licking the lollipops that grew like flowers in the garden, when who should come out of the house but an old lady who looked suspiciously like their stepmother. Only this time she was wearing a tall black pointy hat. She was carrying a broomstick, and she laughed like this. And she said to them,
Hansel and Gretel.
Nobody knows how she knew their names.
Hansel and Gretel, why don't you come inside my house and have some more sweets?
Well, Hansel and Gretel, they should be more careful, but they went inside her house with her, and as soon as they were in, the door slammed, slam! And she was a witch. They should have noticed by the fact she was wearing a black pointy hat and holding a broomstick, and she was laughing like this. And she locked Hansel in a cage straight away, a cage that was hanging from the roof, and she locked it with her key. And she checked it. She locked it again. And she checked it. And she locked it again. And it was shut. Hansel was stuck inside the cage. Gretel said, "Why have you locked Hansel inside the cage?" And the witch laughed again.
I will cook him, and I will eat him. I will cook him in this oven over here in this corner of the room.
And she pointed to the oven in the corner of the room, which was filled with blazing fire. And she said,
I love to eat, boy. It goes especially well with my magic soup in this corner of the room.
And Gretel said, "What makes the soup so magic, witch?" And she said,
That's a good question. What makes it magic is because however much you have, there is always some left. And the best thing to serve with magic soup is, boy.
Now Gretel thought quickly. She said, "But witch, your oven which is filled with blazing fire. Hansel will never fit in there. It's much too small. Look."
And the witch said, I'm looking. It's big enough.
Gretel said, "No, look closely." And the witch said,
I'm looking. It's big enough.
And Gretel said, "No, witch, look very closely." And the witch said,
I'm looking.
Because at that point, Gretel leapt behind her and pushed her into the oven, filled with blazing fire. She slammed the door shut, and the witch was burnt to a cinder and never seen again. Gretel quickly took the key from the wall and unlocked the cage once, twice, 3 times, and the cage sprung open. Hansel leapt out. Gretel was there to greet him, and they said, "Now we will never be hungry again. We can take this cauldron of magic soup back to our own cottage, and we will have all the food we want." And this is what they did. They picked up the cauldron of magic soup between them, and they wandered around in the deep, dark woods until they came to a stream. And they said, "That stream looks familiar. That's the stream where you fell in last week. That tree looks familiar. That's the tree that we used to play hide and seek. That cottage looks familiar. That's our own cottage." And they ran inside the cottage, and there was their father. He was so pleased to see them. "Oh, you're back," he said. "You're back. I didn't like it when you were gone." "Where's stepmother?" they asked. I don't know," he said. She left yesterday wearing a pointy black hat and carrying a broomstick, and I haven't seen her since." And they never saw her again. And they all lived happily ever after.